Why would a Hollywood legend, revered for his stoic silence and gentlemanly composure, suddenly break down in front of a camera and whisper, "He killed her"? Not with a gun, but with something colder? That's not a tabloid headline. That's Robert Duvall, Oscar winner, icon, Texas-bred straight shooter, shaking as he said those words. And he wasn't talking about a movie plot. He was talking about Tommy Lee Jones. And more chillingly, about Tommy's daughter, Victoria. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Dead on New Year's Day. A hotel in San Francisco. Autopsy still pending. But here's the real bombshell. Duvall claims Victoria tried to reach out before she died. And when he didn't answer fast enough, she left something behind. A voicemail, a journal entry, a final plea that would send him spiraling into a guilt-ridden confession. This isn't a true crime drama. This is real. Messy, heartbreaking, and tangled in the kind of twisted silence that only a city like Hollywood could preserve for decades. So why is Robert Duvall speaking now? Why not when she was arrested? Or when she vanished? Or when she showed up at his ranch, barefoot and bruised, at 2 a.m., claiming he wants me gone? Why now? Because something happened on that final night in San Francisco. And when Duvall learned the details, something inside him snapped. He didn't just point a finger. He lifted a curtain. A thick, velvet, silence-stained curtain that Hollywood has kept firmly closed for years. Behind it, a daughter no one saw. A father everyone admired. A journal no one wanted to read. And a truth so disturbing that even Duvall, the quiet cowboy, the Godfather consigliere, the man who played generals and gangsters alike, couldn't keep it in anymore. But here's the question no one's asking. Was Victoria really a victim? Or was she playing a game with her father's legacy, one final, desperate move in a life of tragic spirals? We'll get to that. In fact, we'll get to all of it. Because what Duvall said isn't just controversial, it's nuclear. And the closer we get to the end, the more explosive it becomes. But before we go forward, let's go back to the beginning. To the girl no one wanted to talk about. To the daughter Tommy Lee Jones never publicly claimed. To the voicemail that would haunt Robert Duvall for the rest of his life. To the words, "You know what he did." She wasn't supposed to be famous. Victoria Jones wasn't on red carpets, wasn't photographed with her father, wasn't on talk shows or magazine covers. In fact, most people didn't know Tommy Lee Jones had a daughter named Victoria. But she existed. And now she's dead. Born in the late 80s. Details still murky. Victoria lived her early years in near-total privacy. And that wasn't by accident. Sources close to the Jones family say she was never seen on set, rarely mentioned in interviews, and even kept off school records under an alias at one point. Why? Some say Tommy feared the spotlight would damage her. Others say he feared what she might say if the spotlight ever turned her way. She was described as quiet, then loud, then erratic, then brilliant, then dangerous. But not by outsiders, by people who knew her, by her mother, by former friends. And, reportedly, by Duvall himself, before he changed his mind. Because somewhere along the way, something happened between Robert and Victoria. Not romantically, not even professionally, but emotionally. Duvall once described her, in a now-deleted podcast interview, as a kid with a storm behind her eyes. What kind of storm? That's where the story takes a turn. One that starts with a broken New Year and ends with a shocking voice memo no one was supposed to hear. But before we get there, let's ask the question you're probably already thinking. Why is Robert Duvall, of all people, getting involved? Why not someone closer to her? Why not Tommy? Let's paint the scene. New Year's Eve, 2025, San Francisco. Victoria checks into a small hotel under a fake name. Not unusual. She'd done it before. She orders room service. Leaves the tray untouched. At 2:17 a.m., she places a call. Not to 911. Not to her mother. To Robert Duvall. He doesn't answer. What she says in the voicemail would reportedly later cause Duvall to weep uncontrollably during a private memorial. But at the time, he didn't hear it. He was asleep. And by morning, Victoria was gone. Cause of death, suspected overdose. But was it suicide? That's the mystery. That's the part Duvall can't shake. Because inside her room, according to a hotel staffer who spoke under anonymity, was a handwritten note. Not a goodbye letter. Not a confession. But a name. His name. Tommy. followed by a sentence scrawled in red. He took everything. Now, if that's not enough to make your stomach drop, get this. That sentence. It matches a line in a journal Duvall reportedly kept after filming Lonesome Dove. A line Victoria would have never known, unless she read it. Unless he showed it to her. Unless they were closer than anyone realized. This is where the story starts to twist. Because what if Duvall wasn't just a friend? What if he was the only person Victoria ever trusted? And what if that trust ended the moment he didn't pick up her call? You see, we think of Hollywood as lights and cameras and premieres. But behind the cameras, there are shadows. Shadows that stretch back decades. Shadows that swallow the forgotten children of movie stars. The ones kept out of the spotlight not for protection, but for denial. And in those shadows, Victoria lived. She was, by many accounts, unstable. Arrested multiple times. Checked into rehab. Kicked out of 2 elite colleges. But was that her fault? Or was it a legacy she inherited? A trauma passed down? A silence learned from the man who played the silent cowboy better than anyone alive? In 2022, a tabloid printed a blurry photo of Victoria exiting a court building in LA, head down, hoodie up. The caption? TLJ's secret daughter breaks down in court. It barely made the rounds. But someone kept the clipping. Robert Duvall. He mentioned it, briefly. In a private conversation caught on a hot mic after a film festival event. He said, and I quote, "She was reaching out. I didn't know what to do. He told me to ignore it." Tommy. Why would Tommy tell Duvall to ignore his daughter? Why would Duvall feel haunted by that? And why, now, years later, is he coming forward with stories so dark they're hard to process? The answer may lie in a journal Victoria kept since she was 15. The last entry is dated December 31st, 2025. And it ends mid-sentence. But the part that's legible mentions a memory from childhood. Something about a ranch. A screaming match. A door slammed shut and locked from the outside. And then, silence. We're going to dig deep into that silence. We're going to show you footage you've never seen. Statements from insiders you've never heard. And one final interview, tucked away in a private vault, where Robert Duvall finally says the quiet part out loud. But be warned, what comes next isn't pretty. And it sure as hell isn't fiction. Because in Hollywood, stories are written by winners. And the losers? They're buried with silence. Until someone dares to speak. And this time, Robert Duvall just did. But what he reveals next would shake the foundation of everything we thought we knew about Tommy Lee Jones and the daughter he left behind. What did Robert Duvall reveal next? And more importantly, why did he wait until after Victoria was gone to say it? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. Sometimes silence doesn't protect the innocent. Sometimes it protects the powerful. And sometimes, it slowly crushes the people trapped beneath it. That's the question hanging in the air now. Was Robert Duvall a witness who stayed quiet too long? Or was he manipulated? Used as a final emotional lifeline by a young woman spiraling toward the edge? Because here's the contradiction that refuses to go away. On one hand, people close to Victoria describe a woman who was clearly struggling. Addiction, instability, paranoia, run-ins with the law. A pattern that, to some, screams self-destruction, a tragedy waiting to happen. But on the other hand, they describe a woman who was painfully lucid about one thing. Her father. According to multiple second-hand accounts, again, allegations, not proven facts, Victoria believed Tommy Lee Jones didn't just emotionally distance himself. She believed he erased her. Not from love, from fear. Fear of scandal. Fear of weakness. Fear that a daughter who didn't fit the image might crack the legend. Ask yourself this. How often do we excuse coldness as privacy when it comes from powerful men? How often do we say, that's just how he is, instead of asking who paid the price for it? Because in Victoria's case, the price may have been everything. Robert Duvall didn't meet Victoria through Hollywood events or red carpets. He met her through Tommy. 2 men. Same generation. Same Texas roots. Same reputation for toughness, for silence, for never showing weakness. They weren't best friends, but they were bonded by something deeper than friendship, respect. The kind that doesn't require constant contact. The kind that says, we don't talk about certain things. And that's exactly why what happened next matters. Years ago, long before the arrests, the rehab stints, the hotel room, Victoria allegedly showed up at Duvall's ranch unannounced. Late at night, shaking, exhausted, afraid. That detail keeps surfacing. Afraid. Afraid of what? She reportedly told him she couldn't go home, that she didn't feel safe emotionally, that her father had cut her off in ways that went beyond money. Duvall listened. He didn't judge. He didn't pry. But he also didn't confront Tommy. Why? Because men like them don't do that. They believe in handling things quietly, privately, without witnesses. And that belief may have cost Victoria her life. Or at least, that's what Duvall now seems to fear. Here's where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable. After Victoria's death, Duvall allegedly requested access to her belongings. Not officially, not through lawyers. Quietly. What he found inside her bag wasn't drugs. It wasn't cash. It wasn't even a goodbye letter. It was a folded piece of paper with a list of names. Counselors, doctors, police officers, and two men, Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall. Next to Duvall's name, a single word. Didn't answer. Let that sink in, because that one word has followed him ever since. Didn't answer. Didn't answer the phone. Didn't answer the call. Didn't answer when it mattered. And now, he's answering publicly. But here's the twist most people miss. If Duvall truly believed Tommy Lee Jones ended his daughter's life, emotionally, psychologically, slowly, why didn't he say something earlier? Why wait until she was dead? That question haunts this entire story, and critics have seized on it. Some argue Duvall is projecting guilt, that he's rewriting history to ease his conscience, that Victoria's struggles were real, severe, and ultimately self-inflicted. Others argue something darker, that Duvall knew more than he's saying, and is only revealing pieces now because he can no longer contain them. Which is it? A man confessing too late, or a man finally refusing to stay silent? Because when Duvall described Victoria in that private recording, voice breaking, words uneven, he didn't sound like someone chasing attention. He sounded like someone unraveling. She kept saying the same thing. He reportedly said that he taught her how to disappear. Taught her how to disappear. That phrase matters, because disappearances in Hollywood aren't always physical. Sometimes they're emotional. Sometimes they're financial. Sometimes they're reputational. And sometimes they're generational. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Tommy Lee Jones has never publicly responded to these claims. No interviews. No statements. No denials. Just silence. And silence, in cases like this, becomes its own kind of accusation, or its own kind of shield, depending on how you look at it. Those close to Tommy describe him as emotionally distant, but not cruel. A man who believes in personal responsibility, who doesn't coddle, who doesn't rescue adults from their own decisions. To them, Victoria wasn't abandoned. She was given space. But to Victoria, that space felt like exile. And exile, for someone already struggling, can feel like a death sentence. Here's the uncomfortable contradiction at the heart of this story. Two things can be true at the same time. Victoria could have been deeply troubled, and her father could have failed her emotionally. Those truths don't cancel each other out. They collide. And in that collision, people get hurt. Sometimes fatally. Which brings us back to New Year's Eve. The final hours. The unanswered call. Because according to hotel records, Victoria didn't make multiple attempts to reach people that night. She made one call, to Robert Duvall. Why him? Why not her mother? Why not a friend? Why not emergency services? Because maybe, just maybe, he was the only adult she believed would listen without dismissing her as unstable. And when that call went unanswered, something shifted. Something final. But here's what changes everything. A source close to the investigation claims there was a second voicemail. Not sent. Not delivered. Recorded. Saved. A draft. A message she never sent. And in that message, she says something that reframes the entire narrative. Not about Tommy. Not about blame. But about fear. Fear that the story would be rewritten after her death. Fear that no one would believe her. Fear that silence would win. Again, that message has never been released. But Robert Duvall has heard it. And what it says, if it ever comes out, could dismantle everything we think we know about this case. Because if Victoria wasn't trying to die, if she was trying to be heard, then the question shifts. From who's responsible, to something far more unsettling. Who chose not to listen? And who benefits from that silence? Because the next part of this story doesn't start with Victoria. It starts with her father. his past, his emotional armor, and the pattern that may explain everything that followed. And once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. Have you ever met someone who felt invisible even in the middle of a room? Now imagine growing up in the shadows of someone so famous. His name alone could open any door in the world, except the one that mattered most to you, his heart. That was Victoria Jones. To the world, Tommy Lee Jones is the picture of stoic masculinity. The sheriff, the marshal, the man who hunts fugitives and buries secrets behind a deadpan stare. But behind that public image lived a young woman whose story was almost entirely erased before it even began. Victoria wasn't just hidden. She was deliberately forgotten. And the question that begs to be asked is, why? Why would a man of such stature bury his own daughter's existence beneath red carpets and studio contracts? Was it shame? Was it fear? Or was it something far more deliberate? We have to go back, long before the headlines, long before the New Year's Day tragedy. Back to the beginning, what little of it we can find. Because Victoria Jones's early life isn't just obscure. It's practically non-existent in public records. No paparazzi shots. No verified school enrollments under her real name. No public family photos, not even in childhood. It's as if she was born under a vow of silence. And some insiders claim she was. Sources who worked around Tommy Lee in the 90s and early 2000s say there was a house rule when it came to Victoria. She was not to be discussed. Not on set. Not during press tours. Not ever. One assistant claimed that when a journalist casually asked Tommy about his kids during an interview, his entire demeanor changed. He stared at them for a solid 10 seconds and said, "Next question." And that was it. End of topic. But why? What was so threatening about this one young woman that an actor who faced down movie aliens, terrorists, and military conspiracies on-screen couldn't face her existence off-screen? Let's talk about the rumors. Because without official accounts, that's all we have. Some say Victoria was the product of a relationship Tommy wanted to keep buried, possibly even from the public and his family. Others say she was raised under the care of her mother, far from Hollywood, and that Tommy provided financial support but never love. Still others claim something happened in her childhood that caused a permanent rift, an incident at the ranch, whispered about but never confirmed. The only consistent thread? She was always elsewhere. Elsewhere during award shows. Elsewhere during press junkets. Elsewhere during holidays. There's no record of her attending premieres. No tweets. No Instagram photos. No proud dad moments. You have to ask yourself, how do you become that invisible in the age of digital footprints? You don't. Not naturally. Someone hides you. Or you hide yourself. When she did appear, it was brief, and usually in trouble. In 2015, she was reportedly arrested in Austin for public intoxication. The report was sealed, but someone leaked it to a gossip blog that buried it in a pile of low-performing stories. One photo, blurry, hoodie up, no name mentioned. Only her initials, VJ. Then came another arrest. San Diego, allegedly for resisting arrest during what was described as a mental health episode. Again sealed. Again forgotten. Then silence. Years of it. Until 2022. That's when something changed. That's when she started reaching out to people. Former friends. Distant family. Old teachers. Even actors who had worked with her father. One message, shared anonymously, read, "Tell him I'm not a ghost. He made me one. But I still bleed." That one sentence tells you everything you need to know about Victoria's state of mind. She didn't just feel neglected. She felt erased. And yet, here's where the contradiction kicks in. Some say she wasn't erased. That she chose to stay hidden. That the Jones family tried to help her, but she refused. That she resented her father, not for what he did, but for what he couldn't give, stability. Which is it? Was Victoria the abandoned daughter? Or was she the rebellious child who pushed away anyone who tried to love her? That's what makes this story so painful to unpack. Because both might be true. Trauma is messy like that. People don't fall apart in clean, cinematic ways. They collapse in fragments. Loud, confused, contradictory fragments. And Victoria's life, from what we can piece together, was a mosaic of those fragments. Letters never sent. Phone calls not returned. Journals filled with spirals and poetry and questions like, "Do you love me or are you afraid of me?" There was one person, though, who she seemed to trust. Robert Duvall. She met him when she was young, maybe 10, maybe 11. He was working with Tommy on The Good Old Boys. Victoria visited the set briefly. According to a crew member, she seemed quiet but aware. Duvall apparently gave her a harmonica. No one thought much of it. But years later, she referenced that harmonica in a journal entry. He gave me a voice when I had none. It sounded broken. But it was mine. That's what Duvall meant when he said she was my shadow. Not that she followed him. That she reminded him of himself. Wounded, mistrustful, brilliant, and slowly, silently unraveling. By her late 20s, Victoria was drifting. City to city, couch to couch. She enrolled in a college program briefly, philosophy and creative writing, but dropped out after 3 months. A professor who asked to remain anonymous said she submitted an essay titled, "Erasure is Love. How Disappearance Becomes Devotion." Chilling, in hindsight. In that essay, she argued that some parents don't abandon their children by walking away. They abandon them by refusing to see them. She didn't name her father. She didn't have to. By 2025, Victoria was a ghost in every sense but literal. Except for one thing. She kept reaching out to Duvall. Sometimes emails. Sometimes handwritten notes. Once, according to a close friend, she mailed him a Polaroid with the caption, "Still here. Still breathing. Barely." That same friend says Duvall kept it in a drawer by his bedside. Even now. And yet, when she called him that night, New Year's Eve, he didn't answer. The irony is unbearable. The one person she believed could still see her missed the call. So now we're left with echoes. And fragments. And questions. What was Victoria running from? What was she chasing? Was she mentally ill or emotionally betrayed? Or both? And why did Tommy Lee Jones, a man so powerful, so admired, so intensely private, allow this story to become a ticking time bomb beneath his legacy? That's the real mystery. Because we know what happened on New Year's Day, but what led up to it remains hidden in the shadows. And those shadows? They're about to get darker. Because in the next chapter, we take a closer look at the man behind the silence. The cowboy, the enigma, the father. And what we find might change the way you look at Tommy Lee Jones forever. Let's get real. We all know that look. That scowl. The stone-cold stare that could freeze a raging wildfire in its tracks. Tommy Lee Jones doesn't act like a tough man. He is the tough man. Whether he's hunting fugitives, interrogating aliens, or grilling attorneys in courtrooms, Jones has made a career out of silence, scorn, and sharp-eyed authority. But here's the question no one dares ask. What happens when the man who plays a stoic becomes one in real life? And what's the fallout when that man has a daughter? Because behind every legend is a legacy. And sometimes, that legacy is built on people who were pushed aside, overlooked, or quietly destroyed in the name of discipline, privacy, or pride. Was Tommy Lee Jones one of those men? Was his ice-cold demeanor just a character? Or was it how he treated the people closest to him? And most importantly, did Victoria Jones suffer for it? Let's rewind. Tommy Lee Jones didn't come from Hollywood royalty. He wasn't a Nepo baby with a silver spoon and a famous last name. He was born in San Saba, Texas, the son of a cowboy and an officer worker. Raised on grit, hardened by heat. His father was known for being stern, tough, unforgiving. Tommy inherited that and then amplified it. He wasn't the kind of kid who smiled for the camera. He was the one who stood in the back of the room with his arms crossed, saying nothing but observing everything. He went to Harvard, played offensive guard on the football team, studied English literature, roomed with Al Gore. But ask anyone who knew him back then, they'll tell you the same thing. He didn't talk much. But when he did, you listened. That intensity, the no-nonsense, no frills, no excuses attitude, it made him magnetic. And later, it made him terrifying. Directors who've worked with him tell eerily similar stories. You don't mess with Tommy. You don't feed him small talk. You don't ask dumb questions. One cinematographer said, working with Tommy was like trying to paint in a thunderstorm. You never knew if lightning would strike. And here's where things start to connect. Because while that kind of presence can be electrifying on-screen, off-screen, it can become suffocating. Especially if you're a child trying to earn affection from someone who only seems to know how to intimidate. One of Tommy's former assistants, who worked with him for over a decade, once confided that he never saw Jones speak about his children. Not once. Not at rap parties. Not at dinners. Not on Father's Day. Nothing. It was like they didn't exist, the assistant said. Or like he didn't want them to exist in that world. Tommy has 2 children, but one of them, Victoria, seemed to vanish from the record entirely. How does that happen? How does a man so prominent, so public, erase a daughter from the public eye? Let's be clear. It takes effort to keep someone out of Hollywood's gossip machine. You can't just ignore them. You have to strategically conceal them. And if you're Tommy Lee Jones, you have the clout to do exactly that. You can pay off reporters. You can blacklist stories. You can threaten lawsuits. You can kill the narrative before it's even born. Which raises a terrifying question. Was Victoria a secret or a mistake? Some say Tommy's obsession with privacy bordered on paranoia. He once bought an entire 3,000-acre ranch in Texas just to avoid the press. He reportedly refused to attend an awards afterparty because the media was invited. One director said Tommy would cancel meetings if he saw a single camera crew outside the hotel. So now imagine growing up as his daughter, wanting validation, craving affection, begging to be seen, and constantly being told, verbally or otherwise, no pictures, no attention, no you. Now add to that the explosive contradiction. Your father is one of the most visible men in the world, but you are invisible. How does that affect a young woman? How does that fracture her? How does that distort the way she sees herself? Victoria reportedly told one therapist, years before her death, "My dad's love is a locked room, and I don't have the key." That therapist, who later broke confidentiality under a whistleblower clause after Victoria's death, said she believed Victoria suffered from identity disintegration, a condition common in children raised by emotionally withholding parents. She wanted to be seen, not just by the world, but by him, and he wouldn't give her that. Another report, never officially confirmed but widely circulated in legal circles, claims Victoria once attempted to confront Tommy at a hotel lobby in Los Angeles. She wasn't let past security. He was inside, doing press for a film. She sat on the curb for 2 hours, left a note with the concierge. He never picked it up. So here we are, looking at a man praised for his power and a daughter destroyed by his silence. And maybe the most disturbing part? He never had to raise a hand. Tommy Lee Jones didn't need to scream, or hit, or threaten. All he had to do was withdraw. Take away the gaze. Take away the warmth. Take away the acknowledgement. And for someone like Victoria, already fragile, already fractured, that was enough to create a permanent wound. Now let's pause, because you might be wondering, is this all speculation? Is it fair to paint a man as cold based on secondhand stories? That's a valid question. But here's what we do know. Tommy has never spoken publicly about Victoria's death. He has not attended any known memorials. He has refused, through his representatives, to comment on Robert Duvall's revelations. Multiple insiders confirm he severed contact with Victoria years before her passing. And perhaps most damning, Victoria believed her father was the ghost haunting my life. That phrase appears in 3 separate journal entries. The ghost haunting my life. Here's where things become undeniable. Robert Duvall. Respected. Revered. Careful with his words. He doesn't throw people under the bus. He doesn't stir up scandals. And yet, he broke that pattern for this story. Why? What did he witness? What did he read or hear that pushed him to say publicly, he didn't pull the trigger, but he loaded the gun? Because that's not just regret. That's accusation. It implies Tommy created the conditions for tragedy and then turned away. And Duvall, once a silent bystander, could no longer live with that silence. But let's zoom out. This isn't just about one man. It's about a pattern. Hollywood has a long history of emotionally distant, egocentric fathers who get a pass because they're talented, or powerful, or just that way. But their children don't get that pass. They carry the trauma, the invisibility, the weight of unmet expectations and unresolved rejection. Victoria carried all of that, until she couldn't anymore. So what does this tell us about Tommy Lee Jones? That he's a monster? Maybe not, but perhaps something more haunting. Maybe he's just a man who never learned how to love loudly. And in the absence of that love, a daughter slowly disappeared, until the only thing left of her was a voicemail, a journal, and a question. If he didn't love me, then why do I still want him to? That question lingers. And in the next chapter, we'll dive into the only person who ever seemed to answer it. Robert Duvall. Because while Tommy stayed silent, Duvall listened. and what he heard in Victoria's voice shook him to the core. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What makes a man like Robert Duvall step out of the shadows and say the one thing that could shatter another legend's legacy? Why would he risk his own name, his own friendships, his own peace, to speak about someone the world barely knew? The answer isn't written in headlines. It's written in grief. It's written in guilt. And it started with a harmonica. They say it happened on the set of The Good Old Boys. Texas. Summer heat, so thick you could chew it. Tommy was starring. Duvall was producing. Long shoot days, dusty boots, small talk that was more about cattle than cameras. And in the middle of it, a girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting quietly behind a trailer. Watching. Not talking. Not laughing. Just watching. That was Victoria. She was supposed to be there for the weekend. A bonding trip, someone overheard Tommy say. But the bonding never came. Tommy was too busy. Too focused. Too Tommy. It was Duvall who noticed her. He offered her water. She said nothing. He offered her a harmonica. She smiled. He told her, play it when you're mad, or sad, or just want to be heard without talking. He thought nothing of it. She never forgot. Years later, in a note found among Victoria's belongings, she wrote, Uncle Bobby gave me a voice. It squeaked and cracked, but it was mine. That line hit Duvall like a freight train, because by then, she was gone. But let's not skip ahead. Let's go back to how that Uncle Bobby title came to mean more than anyone realized. After that first encounter, Victoria would occasionally visit sets where Duvall was working, always on her own, never with her father. Sometimes she'd send postcards, sometimes letters, short notes, odd phrases. Do you still have the harmonica? I learned to scream through it. He'd smile, unsure if it was poetry or pain. The turning point came in 2014. Duvall was in LA, doing a quiet fundraiser event for veterans. Out of nowhere, Victoria showed up, uninvited, unannounced. She didn't look like the girl he remembered. She looked thin, ragged, defensive. She asked him for a ride. He gave it. They drove for an hour, said almost nothing. But when they got to the drop-off, some rundown apartment in West Hollywood, she said, without looking at him, he doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't care. And then she got out. That was the beginning of a connection Duvall didn't expect and couldn't shake. Over the next few years, they kept in touch. Occasional phone calls, letters, voicemails. He said it felt like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. She'd disappear for months, then resurface with wild stories. About dreams, about voices, about shadows in Dad's office. Was she unstable? Yes, but she was also lucid, articulate, wickedly intelligent. She would quote Dostoevsky and then cry about how her dad used to mute the TV when she spoke. She once told Duvall, being ignored by someone you love is worse than being hit by someone you don't. That line shook him, because he knew the truth she was circling. Tommy didn't abuse her with fists. He abused her with absence. So what was Duvall's role? Was he a father figure? A friend? A reluctant savior? Maybe all three. He never adopted her. He never publicly claimed her. But he was the only person she called when she spiraled. And that weighed on him. Heavy. He once confided in a friend that Victoria was the call I always feared and never ignored. Until I did. That's the moment everything broke. New Year's Eve. Victoria calls. Leaves a voicemail. Duvall doesn't hear it until the next morning. He's old. He sleeps early. That's the excuse. But it wasn't enough. Because when he pressed play the next day, what he heard wasn't a cry for help. It was a goodbye. No tears. No rage. Just a calm, flat voice saying, you were the only one who listened. I hope you still are. Tell them it wasn't an accident. That's the line that tore him open. Tell them it wasn't an accident. She didn't say what it was. Did she mean her death? Her life? Her erasure? No one knows. But Duvall took it as a mission, a demand, a final request from a girl he once gave a harmonica to, not knowing it would become her only voice. He tried to reach Tommy. Of course he did. Called twice. No answer. Sent a letter. No reply. Requested a meeting through a mutual friend. Tommy declined. That's when Duvall knew. If anyone was going to speak for Victoria, it had to be him. Here's the contradiction Duvall struggled with. He admired Tommy. They had history, shared values, respect. But how do you reconcile that respect with what you've seen, with what you felt? Because Duvall had seen Victoria in states no father should ignore. Crying, screaming, begging, then silent, resigned, numb. He once found her asleep on a park bench. Another time, she called from a hospital, mumbling about being unplugged. Every time, Duvall answered. Until that final time. And now, the guilt is unbearable. In an unreleased interview, scheduled to air posthumously unless revoked, Duvall stares into the camera for 12 full seconds before speaking. Then he says, "She asked me to tell the truth. So here it is. He wasn't cruel. He was worse. He was absent." He continues, "When she needed warmth, he gave her silence. When she needed protection, he gave her rules. And when she needed love, he gave her distance. And then, the final blow. She died with his name in her mouth. And I died a little the moment I heard it." Let that sink in, because this isn't just about a bond. It's about a mirror. Duvall saw himself in Victoria. Not just the pain, the pride, the refusal to beg for love, the way she curled inward when hurt, the way she used sarcasm as armor. She was him, twisted by neglect. And now she's gone. But before she left, she gave Duvall something. A package. It arrived days after her death. Inside, a Polaroid of her at 10 years old, on the set of The Good Old Boys, holding the harmonica, smiling. On the back, scrawled in red marker, "I made noise. Did you hear it?" That photo sits framed on Duvall's piano now, next to the harmonica, next to a candle he lights every New Year's Eve. Every year, he whispers, "I'm sorry," and every year, he promises to speak. And now, he finally has. But what comes next may fracture everything we thought we knew about Victoria's story. Because in the next chapter, we uncover the tapes from Harvard, the ones she never wanted anyone to hear. Until now, how much pain does someone have to carry before it spills into every corner of their life? What happens when the pressure of silence becomes unbearable and the truth starts leaking out in ways no one expected? That's what this chapter is about. The tapes, the ones Victoria recorded at Harvard, the ones no one was supposed to hear. Until now. Let's back up. Most people don't even know Victoria Jones attended Harvard. It wasn't in the headlines. It wasn't on LinkedIn. It wasn't part of any official biography, because there was no official biography. But according to multiple sources, confirmed by dorm registries under an alias, she was there. Briefly. And when she left, she didn't just vanish quietly. She left behind whispers. About breakdowns. About threats. About a girl who claimed her father wasn't just famous, he was dangerous in ways you'll never see coming. Those were her words. Captured on tape. In a campus counseling session. Let's be clear, these tapes weren't meant for public consumption. They were part of a mandated therapy program Victoria was enrolled in after a campus incident involving another student. What happened during that incident has never been fully disclosed. But here's what we do know. It ended with Victoria in a room with two university mental health professionals. One of them, now retired, recently agreed to speak under condition of anonymity. She said Victoria was the most lucid and unstable person I've ever counseled. Lucid and unstable. A contradiction. But that was Victoria. The first tape begins with a soft voice. Measured. Intelligent. Not frantic. "I know how this sounds," Victoria says, "but I need this on record. If anything happens to me, I want someone to remember this." Then there's a pause, followed by, "My father is not a bad man, but he's dangerous." It's that line that haunts the therapist who heard it. Because Victoria wasn't accusing him of physical violence. She wasn't alleging abuse in the traditional sense. She was talking about something harder to pin down. Emotional destruction, neglect, psychological erosion. She says, "He has this way of making you feel like you're broken, without saying a word. He can erase you just by looking through you." The second tape is harder to hear. She's crying, but trying not to. "It's not just that he ignored me," she says. "It's that he trained me to expect it." Then she tells a story about a moment when she was 13. She had made him a birthday card, drew it herself, spent hours on it, covered it in inside jokes and movie quotes. She waited at the ranch for hours to give it to him. When he came in, tired and dusty from riding horses, she handed it to him with a proud smile. He took it, looked at it, nodded, and said, "Go put it on my desk." That was it. No hug, no smile, no thank you. Just, "Go put it on my desk." That was the moment, she said, that something cracked. Not a breakdown. A quiet fracture. The kind that doesn't show up in bruises, but leaves scars anyway. One tape is particularly disturbing. It includes a line that was reportedly cited in internal university documents under the category severe dissociation concerns. Victoria says, "I think sometimes. I don't exist until he acknowledges me. Like I flicker in and out." That statement chilled the therapist. Because it wasn't metaphorical. It was literal. Victoria believed her existence depended on her father's attention. And when he withdrew it, she felt herself disappearing. But here's the twist no one expected. Halfway through the fourth session, Victoria stops talking about her father and starts talking about Robert Duvall. She says, "He was the only one who saw me. And that made it worse. Because it meant I could be seen. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't broken. I just needed someone to look at me like I mattered." She goes on, "If he could do it, why couldn't Dad?" It's that contrast that cuts deepest. Because it wasn't that Tommy was incapable of love. It's that he chose not to show it. And that choice destroyed her. One therapist wrote in her notes, "Victoria displays signs of prolonged emotional abandonment, heightened by proximity to extreme public visibility." In plain English, she was ignored, while the world obsessed over the man ignoring her. Can you imagine what that does to someone? Watching your father win Oscars while pretending you don't exist? Seeing him thank everyone, agents, directors, producers, but never once mention you? It creates a psychological vacuum. And into that vacuum pours insecurity, rage, sadness, until you start to question if you're even real. The last tape is the shortest, only 37 seconds. Victoria says, "If you're listening to this, something's gone wrong." She pauses. Then, "I didn't want to disappear, but I didn't know how to stay." Click. End of recording. Those tapes were locked away, never shared publicly. Until a whistleblower, disturbed by Victoria's death and the total silence that followed, sent digital copies to Robert Duvall's legal team. Duvall listened to all of them, twice. Then he cried. And then, for the first time in his life, he spoke out. There's one more disturbing revelation connected to those tapes. Each session ends with a written summary, typed up by the therapist and stored digitally. In one of those summaries, the therapist wrote, "Patient referenced an event at age 12 that she claimed changed everything, described as a night at the ranch. She refused to elaborate. That's the second time we've heard about the ranch. The first came from her journal, recovered from the San Francisco hotel. A single sentence scrawled in ink. He broke me when I was 12. Could that night be the same event? Was that the turning point? The moment Victoria stopped being a daughter and started being a ghost? We may never know. But those tapes tell us something else just as haunting. Victoria tried to speak. She tried to be heard. And still, the world ignored her. But Robert Duvall didn't. And now that he's heard what she said, he's taking it even further. Because in the next chapter, we trace the spiral. From Harvard, to handcuffs, to hospital beds, to the moment Victoria Jones was arrested for the third and final time. And what happened during that arrest would leave even the police shaken. What does it look like when someone quietly unravels and no one's there to catch them? Not in the dramatic, movie-style breakdowns. Not with sirens and sobbing and intervention scenes. But in slow motion. In parking lots. In alleyways. On sidewalks at 3 a.m. When a person you barely notice starts to vanish before your eyes. That was Victoria Jones in her final years. Not headlines. Not fame. Just pain. And paper trails. There were at least 3 confirmed arrests. Maybe more, depending on which sealed court records you believe. But 3 are documented. 3 times she was pulled from the edge and dropped right back into it. 3 opportunities for someone, anyone, to step in. No one did. The first arrest came in 2015. Austin, Texas. The official charge? Public intoxication. The unofficial truth? A girl alone, barefoot, talking to herself in front of a gas station. The clerk said she wandered in asking for the harmonica man. When they said they didn't know who that was, she curled up by the Slurpee machine and started humming. Police came. She didn't resist. Didn't argue. Didn't speak. She just went limp. When asked for ID, she reportedly gave a fake name. Sally Duvall. That's not just sad. That's a scream. Even in crisis, she was calling for Robert. Not her father. Not her mother. Robert. The man who gave her a harmonica when she was 10. Let that sink in. The second arrest happened in 2018. San Diego. Disorderly conduct. Witnesses say she was standing in the middle of the street, arms raised, crying. Not shouting. Not yelling. Just crying. Repeated one phrase over and over. I'm not real. I'm not real. I'm not real. When officers approached, she backed away. One officer said she looked completely detached, like her soul was unplugged. She was taken into custody for her own safety. Held 72 hours. No one came to pick her up. No emergency contact. No family. When asked who to call, she whispered, "No one. They already left." She was released. Walked out with no shoes. Never looked back. And then came the third arrest. The one that broke her. San Francisco, 2023. Victoria had just been evicted from a low-income apartment. Neighbors say she'd been quiet, but strange. Talked to a bird that wasn't there. Left notes under people's doors. But she paid her rent. Kept to herself. Then one night, she snapped. Security footage shows her wandering into a nearby hotel lobby at 1:37 a.m. She was disheveled. Eyes wild. She walked up to the desk and asked, "Do you have a room without mirrors?" The clerk said no. She became agitated. Started pulling mirrors off the walls, smashing them on the floor. Screaming, "I won't be watched. I won't be watched." Guests came down in pajamas. Staff called police. When officers arrived, she had locked herself in a janitor's closet, rocking back and forth, clutching a notebook. They opened the door. She didn't fight. She whispered, "You found me." She was arrested for destruction of property. But what the officers found in her notebook stunned them. Dozens of pages, filled with scribbles, riddles, quotes. But one phrase repeated again and again. "Tell Robert the first tried." Some pages had it once. Others, 20 times. 100. Different pens. Different ink. Over and over. "Tell Robert the first tried." That phrase was forwarded to his legal team days later. When Duvall read it, he reportedly went silent. Then said, "She knew I'd listen, and I didn't." What was Victoria trying to say? Was this a coded message? Was she preparing for something? Or was this just the fractured mind of a woman abandoned too many times? Some believe it was both. A desperate cry, and a final act of defiance. Because even in custody, stripped down, locked up, she didn't mention her father once. Not in interviews. Not in paperwork. Not even in passing. He didn't exist. Just Robert. After her release, she disappeared for 11 days. No one knows where she went. Credit cards inactive. Phone off. No known address. When she resurfaced, she was thinner, quieter. Something had changed. She told a friend she met during court-mandated therapy, "It's like I'm made of paper now. One more fold, and I'll tear." She wasn't being poetic. She was being precise. Victoria had reached her breaking point, and no one could see it. Or maybe they didn't want to. Here's the most heartbreaking detail. During that third arrest, one of the officers took a photo for internal documentation. Not mugshots. Those were sealed. This was different. She's sitting on a bench, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes hollow, and on her wrist, a tattoo. Tiny, red, fresh, a symbol, unrecognizable to the officers. But later, Robert Duvall saw the photo. And when he saw that tattoo, he froze. Because he knew it. It wasn't a random image. It was the logo of a film they worked on together years ago. The Apostle, a movie about broken faith, lost souls, redemption. The same movie where Duvall once said, "You can lose your way, but not your voice." Victoria had made that her creed. Until the end. After that arrest, she stopped sending letters. Stopped calling. Stopped everything. She wasn't arrested again. But she wasn't living either. She was existing. Drifting. Waiting for something. Maybe peace. Maybe death. Maybe forgiveness. And then came New Year's Eve. The hotel. The unanswered call. The harmonica on the table. And the final sentence written in her journal. "I wasn't real. But the pain was." There's a final detail you need to hear. After her death, one of the arresting officers from that third incident filed a request to access her case file again. He said something didn't sit right. That the hotel scene didn't match her spiral. She didn't look manic. She looked prepared, as if she knew what was coming. And according to that officer, she left something behind in that janitor's closet, taped to the inside of the door. One final sentence, written in black marker. Simple, direct, devastating. "He watched me vanish." No one knows if she meant Tommy, or Robert, or both. But one thing is clear. Victoria Jones didn't die out of nowhere. She died after a long, painful descent that we all ignored. Until now, because the next chapter takes us to the secret meeting, the one Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones try to keep hidden. The confrontation, the shouting, the broken whiskey glass, and the moment Duvall finally said the one thing that made Tommy walk out in silence. What happens when two Hollywood titans, both defined by silence, strength, and stoicism, find themselves face to face over something neither of them can outrun? Not a movie deal, not a script, not even a scandal, but the death of a girl both of them failed in very different ways. One by blood, the other by omission. That meeting took place behind closed doors, but parts of it leaked. And once you hear what was said, you'll understand why it was never meant to see the light of day. Let's set the stage. Austin, Texas. Late January, just weeks after Victoria's body was found in a San Francisco hotel. Robert Duvall flies in. Not for work, not for press, not for anything public. He comes for one reason: to speak with Tommy Lee Jones. According to multiple sources, the meeting was arranged by a mutual friend, an old producer who had worked with both men on several projects. He booked them a private room at an exclusive members-only club in Austin. No cameras, no waitstaff, just a single bottle of expensive scotch, 2 chairs, and silence. Duvall reportedly arrived early. Tommy showed up 10 minutes late. Neither hugged, neither shook hands. They sat, they stared, and then they spoke. What's known about the conversation comes from a security guard who was stationed near the door, and from a small audio clip secretly recorded by someone in the kitchen staff. The audio is muffled, hard to follow, but certain lines pierce through. Like this: Duvall, she called me. Tommy, silence. Duvall, she left a message. Tommy, I don't want to hear this. Duvall, you don't get to not hear it. Then, a pause. The sound of glass hitting the table. And this: Duvall, she said you took everything. What happened next, according to the guard outside, was explosive. Muffled shouting, chairs shifting, a glass thrown, shattered. But no one left. Not yet. They stayed in that room for nearly an hour. Two aging giants, wrestling with decades of guilt, denial, and rage. When the door finally opened, it was Duvall who exited first. Visibly shaken, eyes red, hands trembling, he reportedly muttered to the guard. Pride. That man'll die from pride. Tommy stayed inside for another 40 minutes. Alone. Why does this meeting matter? Because up until that point, Duvall hadn't blamed Tommy publicly. He'd mourned. He'd reflected. But he hadn't accused. That changed after this meeting. 2 days later, in a private interview with a documentary filmmaker, Duvall said, he didn't push her, but he stood there and watched her fall. He followed with something even colder. Some men break you with fists. Others break you with absence. He mastered the second. That line shattered everything. Because it wasn't just a grieving old man lashing out. It was a man who knew Tommy. Intimately. Professionally. Personally. And who had decided, after that meeting, that silence was no longer protection. It was complicity. So what did Tommy say in that room? That part remains a mystery. He never responded publicly. Never issued a statement. Never called Duvall back. But according to the guard and the hidden audio clip, one phrase did slip out. One that caught Duvall off guard. When Duvall pressed him about Victoria's childhood, about the night at the ranch, about the letters and the missed calls, Tommy finally snapped and said, she was too much for me. Those 6 words. They were like a confession, the guard said. Not of guilt, but of defeat. As if Tommy had spent years justifying his absence by convincing himself that his daughter was too much. Too emotional. Too broken. Too loud for a man who built his life around silence. Here's where the contradictions start to bleed. Because some people, those who remain close to Tommy, insist he did care. That he did try. That Victoria pushed him away, accused him of things he didn't understand, blamed him for a pain he didn't cause. They say he paid for her therapy, paid her rent, called her more than once, only to be screamed at. They say the real tragedy is that he stopped trying because every attempt ended in chaos. Is that true? Possibly. But does that excuse the silence? The absence? The erasure? Even Duvall, who knows how complex family can be, couldn't forgive that. Not anymore. Not after hearing that voicemail. Not after reading the journal entries. Not after learning that she died clutching a picture of them, Duvall and Victoria, on the set of The Apostle. There's one more detail from that meeting. one that no one wanted leaked. And yet, here it is. Near the end of the conversation, Duvall reportedly stood up, looked Tommy in the eye, and said, "You built a fortress so thick, not even your own daughter could get through." Then he added, "She died trying to find the door." Tommy didn't reply. He just stared, then turned his glass over, let the last drops of scotch spill onto the table. Like blood, like a eulogy, like something that can't be taken back. Why did Duvall share this? Why expose a man he once called a brother in arms? Because sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to stop protecting the living. He didn't want to ruin Tommy. He wanted to resurrect Victoria, her voice, her story, her truth, even if it meant burning bridges, even if it meant being labeled a traitor, even if it meant walking away from decades of quiet loyalty. And here's the chilling aftermath. After that confrontation, Duvall flew back to Virginia. Quietly. No press. No cameras. Just him. And the harmonica. The same one he gave Victoria when she was 10. Sources close to him say he keeps it in his coat pocket now. Always. Like an anchor. Like a reminder. Like guilt that whistles every time the wind blows. But this story isn't over. Because what Duvall discovered after that meeting would only deepen the mystery. A journal. A final entry. And a symbol no one recognized. Until someone came forward. A tattoo artist. Who said, "I gave her that symbol. And I know what it means." And what it meant could change everything we thought we understood about Victoria's final days. What makes a man like Robert Duvall step out of the shadows and say the one thing that could shatter another legend's legacy? Why would he risk his own name, his own friendships, his own peace, to speak about someone the world barely knew? The answer isn't written in headlines. It's written in grief. It's written in guilt. And it started with a harmonica. They say it happened on the set of The Good Old Boys. Texas. Summer heat, so thick you could chew it. Tommy was starring. Duvall was producing. Long shoot days, dusty boots, small talk that was more about cattle than cameras. And in the middle of it, a girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting quietly behind a trailer. Watching. Not talking. Not laughing. Just watching. That was Victoria. She was supposed to be there for the weekend. A bonding trip, someone overheard Tommy say. But the bonding never came. Tommy was too busy. Too focused. Too Tommy. It was Duvall who noticed her. He offered her water. She said nothing. He offered her a harmonica. She smiled. He told her, "Play it when you're mad. Or sad. Or just want to be heard without talking." He thought nothing of it. She never forgot. Years later, in a note found among Victoria's belongings, she wrote, "Uncle Bobby gave me a voice. It squeaked and cracked, but it was mine." That line hit Duvall like a freight train. Because by then, she was gone. But let's not skip ahead. Let's go back to how that Uncle Bobby title came to mean more than anyone realized. After that first encounter, Victoria would occasionally visit sets where Duvall was working, always on her own, never with her father. Sometimes she'd send postcards, sometimes letters, short notes, odd phrases. "Do you still have the harmonica? I learned to scream through it." He'd smile, unsure if it was poetry or pain. The turning point came in 2014. Duvall was in LA, doing a quiet fundraiser event for veterans. Out of nowhere, Victoria showed up, uninvited, unannounced. She didn't look like the girl he remembered. She looked thin, ragged, defensive. She asked him for a ride. He gave it. They drove for an hour, said almost nothing. But when they got to the drop-off, some rundown apartment in West Hollywood, she said, without looking at him, "He doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't care." And then she got out. That was the beginning of a connection Duvall didn't expect and couldn't shake. Over the next few years, they kept in touch. Occasional phone calls, letters, voicemails. He said it felt like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. She'd disappear for months, then resurface with wild stories. About dreams, about voices, about shadows in Dad's office. Was she unstable? Yes, but she was also lucid, articulate, wickedly intelligent. She would quote Dostoevsky and then cry about how her dad used to mute the TV when she spoke. She once told Duvall, "Being ignored by someone you love is worse than being hit by someone you don't." That line shook him, because he knew the truth she was circling. Tommy didn't abuse her with fists. He abused her with absence. So what was Duvall's role? Was he a father figure? A friend? A reluctant savior? Maybe all three. He never adopted her. He never publicly claimed her. But he was the only person she called when she spiraled, and that weighed on him. Heavy. He once confided in a friend that Victoria was the call I always feared and never ignored, until I did. That's the moment everything broke. New Year's Eve. Victoria calls, leaves a voicemail. Duvall doesn't hear it until the next morning. He's old. He sleeps early. That's the excuse. But it wasn't enough. Because when he pressed play the next day, what he heard wasn't a cry for help. It was a goodbye. No tears. No rage. Just a calm, flat voice saying, "You were the only one who listened. I hope you still are. Tell them it wasn't an accident." That's the line that tore him open. Tell them it wasn't an accident. She didn't say what it was. Did she mean her death? Her life? Her erasure? No one knows. But Duvall took it as a mission, a demand, a final request from a girl he once gave a harmonica to, not knowing it would become her only voice. He tried to reach Tommy. Of course he did. Called twice. No answer. Sent a letter. No reply. Requested a meeting through a mutual friend. Tommy declined. That's when Duvall knew. If anyone was going to speak for Victoria, it had to be him. Here's the contradiction Duvall struggled with. He admired Tommy. They had history, shared values, respect. But how do you reconcile that respect with what you've seen, with what you've felt? Because Duvall